Hello, I'm Evan Jenkins. I have the honor of serving as Chief Justice of the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals. Under our state constitution, the Supreme Court oversees our third branch of government, the judiciary. Each day, 1,500 West Virginians get up and go to work to administer a justice system that is fair, accessible, and without bias. We are in every courthouse in every county in West Virginia. Before I go into detail about our FY 2022 budget, let me first summarize a few key points. Our total budget request is $139,400,000. That is actually less than the amount appropriated to the Supreme Court 6 years ago in FY 2016. This year's request is 2.8% above the current year's appropriation, or just over $3.9 million. About half of the increase is the judicial pay raise the legislature approved last year, and once again, let me say thank you. How are we doing this year? We just finished the first 6 months of the year on December 31st, 2020, and our year-to-date expenses are 47.8% of what we are budgeted to actually spend this entire year. You specifically asked for information about our COVID-related expenses. We followed the state's consultants' guidance on what expenses may be eligible for reimbursement through the CARES Act or other governmental funding programs. And so far, we've identified as much as $14.1 million. And to put our budget in perspective with the overall state's budget, the judicial branch is less than 3% of the total state general revenue spending. Let me take a minute now to provide a quick overview of the judiciary for the new legislators. There are currently 1,503 state employees in the judicial branch. If I break them down in very broad categories, we have 285 elected judicial officers, including 158 magistrates, 47 family court judges, 75 circuit judges, and 5 Supreme Court justices. The next largest group of employees are our probation officers. We have 300 probation officers who supervise about 10,000 people currently on probation. It is important to point out the work they do. They protect the public by ensuring probationers are following the terms of their probation, drug testing, home visits, pre-sentencing reports, and supervising hundreds of high-risk probationers, such as sex offenders, is all in a day's work for these frontline public safety employees. Within what we call the AO, or Administrative Office, we have 129 employees. There are 11 divisions within the AO that oversee and support the operations of the courts throughout the state. We also have many employees that perform important work that you might actually not typically think of as traditional court employees, such as the 50 employees within the Division of Technology that take care of all the network connections, infrastructure, and equipment used by magistrates, judges, and judicial employees in all 55 counties. Let me next mention the ongoing work the justices are doing to build the public's trust and confidence in the courts. Across the country and in Washington, we see government institutions being challenged, and the judiciary is certainly not immune. I am putting special emphasis during my year as Chief Justice to engaging the public on the important work we do to guarantee a judicial system that is fair, accessible, and without bias. A civil society absolutely depends on it. The Supreme Court also is committed to operating a judicial system that is fiscally responsible, transparent, and accountable. Since 2018, we've adopted or substantially revised a number of policies to make sure the problems of the past never happen again. This includes a travel policy, P-card policy, accounting policies, asset management policies, procurement policy, acceptable use of information systems policy, and a rewritten employee handbook, just to name a few. But we also know that just having a policy isn't good enough. You have to live by it. I am happy to report, and it's in your packets, that the legislative auditor performed a re-review of the policies we put in place over the past 2 years and our compliance with those policies. In its follow-up audit on policies and procedures, the legislative auditor, quote, commended the court for its quick actions to establish thorough and well-researched controls. The report also noted that the court had designed an effective overall system of internal controls over its operations. I have also included in your handout material the account detail from the state's OASIS system that show our revenue expenses all the way down to the amount we spend on postage. This is the third year in a row we've provided this transparency, and we are not aware that this has ever been done in the past. You requested specific information on our operations during COVID. Well, where do I begin? Let me first say, Chief Justice Armstead did an outstanding job leading the judiciary through this extremely challenging period. The justices, working with our senior management team and division directors, issued several administrative orders that provided guidance and flexibility to empower judges at the local level to coordinate and adjust the workings of the court to fit local health and safety concerns. Simply shutting down our courts, sending everybody home, and letting the work pile up was not an option. The West Virginia Constitution mandates that the courts of this state shall be open and that justice shall be administered without delay. If you're a victim of domestic violence or a child suffering from abuse and neglect, just to give you two obvious examples, we must have a judicial system that's open and accessible, and we do. We authorize the purchase of laptops and computer equipment to be able to prepare COVID kits that could be dispatched to county courthouses when there is a COVID outbreak to help operate remotely. A great example of how we were able to adapt quickly was right here in Charleston, when the judicial annex housing the magistrate court was forced to shut down because of COVID exposure. We were able to bring in senior status magistrate Marva Crouch and set her up to run the Kanawha County Magistrate Court for over a month in Kanawha City. We installed the network connections, equipment, and video links to the regional jails to make sure the work got done. Another example of how we adapted was purchasing a cell phone with a common platform and secure video apps for every magistrate in the state. This enabled them to conduct remote proceedings, issue arrest warrants, and set bond, just to mention a few of their everyday tasks, but in a safe, secure way. Working with the State Budget Office and following the state consultant's guidance, we've submitted so far $14.1 million for potential COVID funding. $13.8 million is for probation officers' payroll costs under public safety reimbursement. Other expenses were non-payroll costs, such as personal protective equipment or PPE, cleaning supplies, plexiglass barriers, and remote work technology. Now, let me focus on our fiscal year 2022 budget request. As I mentioned at the beginning, we are asking for less money next year than the legislature approved for the judiciary 6 years ago. These past 2 years, we have really tightened the judiciary's budget and truly appreciate the good working relationship we have with you to craft a budget that works. In your handouts, you have a complete breakdown of our budget request. You will note that personnel services and employee benefits is $115,126,000, or 83% of our total general revenue budget request. 15% of our budget, or just over $20 million, goes to current operating expenses. Now, last year, we included a chart you said was helpful that listed the items within the operating expenses that were $1 million or more. The largest this coming year will be $2.8 million for attorney legal services. That's guardians ad litem, mental hygiene commissioners, and guardianship. You can see other expenses are items such as jury fees, telecommunications, rent, and contractual services, which include drug testing for probationers and treatment court participants, to name a few. Speaking of drug testing, I am pleased to let you know that the court put out for bid these services and just approved an in-state provider that can do each drug screen at a reduced cost. The legislature is always concerned about the cost and size of government, so I wanted to provide a breakdown of the number of court administration employees. Approximately 1/2 of these employees are grant-funded positions or work in information technology. We also have broken down our budget so you can see where the money is spent in the work we do. The largest amount, 24.1% of our budget, goes to operating the circuit courts around West Virginia. Next, the magistrate courts in every courthouse in every county in West Virginia is 22.5%. Then the third is the probation officers and the probation work at 21.4%. Only 5.4% of our request is to fund the operations of the Supreme Court, the clerk's office, or the Office of Counsel here under the dome in Charleston. The legislature has been a strong supporter of the specialty courts program. Currently, there are 29 adult drug courts covering 46 counties and 15 juvenile drug courts covering 17 counties. Wood, Harrison, Raleigh, Logan, and Ohio counties have veterans treatment courts within their adult drug courts. We are also off to a good start on the new family treatment courts you authorized last year. We have 8 courts covering 9 counties, and so far 152 individuals have been assessed, 101 accepted, and 129 children have or are being served. Let me conclude with the details on our $3.9 million requested increase over fiscal year 2021 funding. 48% of the increase, or $1.8 million, is for last year's judicial pay raise legislation. An additional $1.9 million of the request is to fill vacant positions or the incremental increases based on years of service or achieving educational milestones for many of our employee classifications. Thank you again for the opportunity to provide an overview of the important work we do in the judiciary, our continuing efforts to work cooperatively in a transparent way with both you, the legislature, and the executive branch, and our budget proposal for fiscal year 2022. Thank you very much.